Hi there, and welcome back to It's Not Rocket Science 5 Questions Over Coffee. I'm delighted, one, to have my coffee in front of me, which is the most important part of all of this. There's not very much left in there at the moment, so I'm going to need to refill that soon. But I'm also delighted to welcome Ryan, who tells me he has decaf coffee in front of him. So uh, don't
Absolutely.
uh, don't fall asleep on us, Ryan. You got to be entertaining us for the next 20 minutes or so. Ryan is a keynote speaker, a coach, a fractional chief operating officer, and he really helps teams within the construction, architectural design space to navigate change, to think about the way in which they have to approach the changes that they're approaching in their business. But it's a common problem that all business owners have to think about, which is how do you navigate the changes in
Mhm.
the business landscape around you. So, Ryan, welcome to It's Not Rocket Science 5 Questions Over Coffee. Thoroughly looking forward to this. So, please take your time to tell us a little bit more about how you help these teams to navigate change.
Yeah, well, thank you for having me, Stuart. I appreciate the opportunity. I'm looking forward to the questions and the conversation. Even though it's decaf, try to run off some natural energy. Um,
That seems entirely reasonable. So let's start with the first question, which is,
right.
look, I've already said that you work with sort of teams in the sort of architectural construction space, but the common problem. What are the sort of the sort of give me the sort of common ideal client, the person that sort of really is seeking sort of help from somebody like you at the moment.
Yeah, I think there's a couple categories, but generally they find themselves pretty much all in an area where they're recognizing that current state isn't exactly what they want,
Mm,
and they can envision this future state that they want to get to, but they all in some way form undervalue that middle area. And that middle area is where things are uncertain, things are confusing, things are unknown, and we've never seen them, we don't recognize them. It's what we call change. They
yeah,
undervalue that time, and by undervaluing it, they each have one group will overvalue current state and stay in it, and the other group will tend to rush through that center area and lack the connection of human complexity into the change that's occurring, whether in their individual life, within a team, or an organization.
and tell me, Ryan. I mean, you've been doing this for a while. You have some experience in it. What are the sort of things that you've seen these business owners, these people within these sort of situations try before they reach you? I know when I've come across people that are doing this, they've normally done a bunch of things that try to help, but rarely sort of seek out an expert such as yourself, and I don't always succeed.
Yeah, it's, they say 70% of all change management in companies fail to meet the objective.
Mm,
And so a lot of times what I mentioned, this middle area and undervaluing it, it's they'll make an attempt on a new strategy, a new process, try a new solution within a project per se, and it doesn't go exactly as planned because they've never seen it before, and then they halt. And a lot of people will give up on that center change area, which is, it takes a lot of time for us to learn something new, to develop new skills. We already have habits. If we think about just a daily routine habit of getting up in the morning, when who hasn't said like, oh, I'm sorry, I'm sort of all out of sorts, I got out of my routine in the morning.
yeah,
So
yeah.
yeah, when you get into that center area, what I see a lot of companies doing is, again, disconnecting the human side of change.
Yeah.
And it's the objectives there. We want to get this software put into place, or there's a merger and acquisition done, or whatever, it could be large or small sort of change that's occurring, but they don't go to the humans and have the real conversations. So they'll only bring up results and sort of go there. They won't drill any deeper into the conversation to find out the root cause. They'll overvalue that current state as being something like, hey, I've already been doing this a long time, I know how to do it, versus sort of a beginner's mindset of how do I test this? How do I work through this change in order to learn? And I think you come from the world of science, and I try to tell everybody, is like, if we treated every project sort of as a laboratory or a change internally as this free testing zone to regain knowledge on something that we've never seen before, it doesn't mean that we aren't taking what we've already known and just eliminating it. We're actually able to sort of stack on and grow. And I just find people rush through this. They see the goal and they want to rush through it. It's like,
Yeah.
hey, as simple as, hey, I want to lose some weight. Well, you can't just rush through that process, but you can start to recognize each day the little wins. And you don't rush through university. The beauty of university is you go in and you're developing your learning. And even though you want to be on the other side of it, even though at the end of the clarity is to graduate, you don't know what's happening on a daily basis. You can see the courses, but you don't know for sure. But where you're really in growth is that middle confusion, unknown territory that allows you to develop. And to begin to build a stronger relationship with change, because you're now recognizing it as an opportunity and a positive, not as a disruption or a cost or a burden to yourself.
Yeah. And I think you've mentioned two things, and what comes across to me most resonantly is change is tough, change is hard. People's habits. I mean, I often remember the sort of the exercise that I was taught when I was doing some of this, which is, this is the way you naturally lock your fingers. But if you do it the other way, it feels wrong and it feels unnatural, and you desperately want to get back to the way it feels right. And just that action of sort of holding it there can make you feel uncomfortable, can make you feel very, very exposed, if you like. And just having to do that behavior change or introduce something new takes people time to sort of understand that things won't be as threatening as perhaps they feel it is when they first come across it. And
Yeah.
the other thing, as you say, is that sometimes when you are in that state, when you're uncomfortable, and when it's you have to start to think to yourself, okay, this might not be as threatening as I first thought it was, but I have to want to learn to go through this. And getting to that mindset of wanting is kind of
Yeah.
tough for a lot of people. The business owner just wants to get them through it, and they're going, oh, I was comfortable. Why are you making me do stuff which I've got enough discomfort when I go home. I've got a family that I've got to deal with. Why make me go through this discomfort now? I just want to come here and be comfortable and enjoy myself. This is
Yep.
tough.
Yeah, it's what I call willing participants versus forced
Yeah.
compliance, right? So this is where leaders sort of begin to get it a little off track. A lot of times they're up the hill and they believe they've said it, so therefore the change is happening. And you have a middle layer who is trying to initiate the change, and everyone has their own agenda and their own goals towards the bigger goal. And this is where the human side, having that empathy of how difficult it is as a human to change, like just go do something simple, get a new haircut, which I don't have the privilege to do anymore, but like go change a style, get a new shirt, get something small. How long does it take to adjust? And when you start to recognize that within yourself and give yourself that time, that grace of adjustment period towards something new, you can extend that same empathy towards others on your team, whether you're all coworkers or you are the manager or you're the leader. But when you connect the change to humans and the way our brains want to function, without getting into a lot of the science, because I know a lot of your shows have been able to already start to explain that. You described habits. They're great. They're perfect. We want them because that's where we can speed up and be what we consider at our most efficient. But we really hold on to that as, again, that overvalued state versus achieving what we want to, like seeing this middle area of, it's always going to be a little unclear. The goal's there, but how you get there is going to still be unclear. You overvalue that pain of going through it, or work to go through it, or the some people look at it as like, well, what if I fail? I'll be embarrassed, and what if I'm wrong? Versus believing in yourself and saying, like, I value that I have the ability to get through this, and even when it's not exactly what I thought, I can reframe my thought process in that moment of, I've been here somewhere near here before. I've been through these things. I have the ability, and think through with a team. But if we think embarrassment is like the end, or we've thought something our whole life and now it's wrong, and we're afraid to say it and hold on to something, there's actually more cost to that and more pain to that. But it's familiar, so we keep it.
Yeah, and learning is hard, isn't it? I mean, we could do an entire 20, 30 hours on just learning, but I mean, learning is hard, but is often undervalued in these situations. And I think you're absolutely right. That people too often go back to when a learning situation was difficult for them and go, well, I just don't want to be there. We have to find these easy ramps, these easy paths, don't we?
Yeah.
And I'm going to sort of bring in now, because I think you've got some great some great offers and things that people which we've put into our free stuff vault, where Ryan just took us through. I know there are a couple of offers in there, but people, if you go and look at these immediately, in my opinion, immediately is possibly too strong a word, but you need to get hold of these and have a look at what Ryan is giving away in terms of his valuable advice. Ryan, just talk us through sort of some of the stuff that you've been able to sort of offer to the listeners here.
Yeah, so we've got a couple ebooks that are out there really around mindset, and also just being able to navigate change by being more curious. Like, curiosity is like the key to me of change. And also this idea that it's okay to be wrong once in a while. And what I mean by that, it's not that we always want to just stand, and fight against something that we don't truly believe in, but that you could attempt to do something and it may not go exactly as you thought. But now and this is that world of science. And I'm trying, these areas are about reframing our thought about our relationship with change. And there's some steps and some things that you can go into, especially in chapter 3 of the change mindset, that some activities that you can begin to put yourself through that will help you sort of like assess your own relationship. Because I don't, you can't drive change as an individual in a company if you're not usually a willing participant, or you aren't quite sure how you react. How do your emotions come up when something happens? Until you recognize that your relationship with change tends to be one-sided, and no relationship is strong when it's one-sided. And I would say the other thing that we typically will do is a strategy session or a discovery call, because there's no one problem. As a coach or a consultant, every company is different. While there's some similarities, it's just getting to know. I've got to get closer to the team. I've got to get closer to the problem to be able to assess and work with them and build a relationship. Because consulting is advice, coaching is questions. Like, I'm trying to get to your curiosity level to help you explore. And it's, to me, like, even with the speaking, I am just trying to spark enough curiosity that makes people start to question, like, I don't know, how did I learn this? Where did I get it from? Things like that, to be willing to say, hey, I'm curious enough to go through this, like you said, and begin to make change.
I think that's a brilliant way of putting it, because to make that sort of change, for you to start that journey, I mean, it doesn't matter where you are within an organization, you have to be curious about your own beliefs, your own behaviors, in order to get to the stage where you go, I now need to move beyond this behavioral pattern which has caused me to stay where I am. Because I said this to one organization very recently who said, well, we're talking specifically about the fact that their growth had stalled, and I said, well, it hasn't stalled, it's going backwards, because the world is advancing, whether you like it or not. Everybody around you is moving on, and so if you're sort of staying static, it means you're losing relative to everybody else 2, 3, 4, 5% a year. So you have to be changing constantly. Otherwise, you are behind. You're losing just by the fact that you're saying, well, I'm comfortable where I am. You're in actual fact losing. And so having that cautious sort of belief that you need to question is absolutely critical to that whole process. I love what you were saying.
Yeah, I think we forget that we're changing from the moment we're born. Like,
Yeah.
life is constantly changing, but we're all, I think it is. It's important that we create habits, because we're taught that like there's a reason that you have to go through routines, and you got to get them sort of ingrained and embedded. But where I started questioning things, little things, is like, as I learned math, my parents were teaching me, those teachers were teaching me, everyone had learned math the same way. But when I started teaching my son, I had never seen some of the new math that was coming through. And while I could be frustrated, and I probably did get frustrated, like, why can't I figure this out? Why can't I learn it? I started realizing that the challenges that generation is going to have are different than ours. But we've learned math the same way, or we've done things the same way as all the other generations prior, and without questioning, like, where did we figure this? Where did we learn this? Or, why do I believe this? Without doing that exploration, like, we're sort of allowing, like, we love choice and we love control, but we're allowing other things to control us by not questioning it. And even though it may
Yeah.
not be different, without knowing, we're letting someone else make a choice for us.
Brian, there must have been a book, of course, a life experience that brought you to where you are, with this knowledge, with this understanding, with this expertise in how to help construction companies go through the sort of changes you're talking about. Where did that come from? What was the origination of that? What was the book or course that you think you'd recommend others sort of think about?
Yeah, I think the book that really hit home was Carol Dweck's Mindset. Of course, which is a couple decades old, but the things that I was seeing on a daily basis of how I was practicing architecture, and left architecture and got into construction, and was really trying to get people to reevaluate how they were building. I watched, like, why isn't this taking off? I started just questioning, like, this has been around 100 years. Why isn't this taking off? Like, we know there's other problems, like all of it, labor shortage, all of these things occurring. I needed to know, like, what was the resistance? And
Yeah.
we could say it's risk, we can say all of these things, but I just needed to start to understand the human mind. So reading Mindset by Carol Dweck kicked off this area for me to start thinking about, how I trained people in architecture, how I learned, how I wanted to take more of a coaching approach to it, and stretching people's minds as I was going through a change, and implementing, process, and, into those conversations, because I couldn't force them to do it. If I forced groups to take on what I was trying to put in front of them as hey, here's a new method of construction, try it. That's when they go into defense, right? And it didn't work, or I don't have a choice, someone is making me do this, opposed to using more curiosity, kind of driven questions while having conversations with them. They're trying to get them into not just their idea, but becoming those willing participants. So, whether it's, the Carol Dweck's, and then reading a lot of the Dan Heath books. But one of my most favorite recent books is Amy Edmondson from Harvard, which wrote The Right Kind of Wrong. And you being
great book
from science, right? Like, it's a beautiful area where you go back to that curiosity and exploration, where just because you didn't get the answer today with all of the work that you did, it wasn't lost, because you're using that experience as like, we just know this wasn't the right answer. It doesn't mean it's the wrong answer. It just means it's one step closer to the right answer,
Yeah,
and being able to
absolutely.
bounce back quicker. And I think that's one of the, that book has allowed me to be like, we have to think differently in this industry to address our problems. We've got to kind of stretch our mind into more curiosity, sort of building experiences that create the project like a lab, that we get the freedom to be wrong once in a while, to make a mistake that some would say is too costly, which we're not talking about like, buildings collapsing. We're talking about just selecting a new method, selecting a new delivery model, selecting a new material finish that addresses other areas. So anyway, those are probably some of the books, but I would say the one right now is Amy Edmondson's.
And I think Amy Edmondson has a wonderful way of looking at it, from all the way over from the malicious intent to destroy through to the, hey, I was experimenting and that's a good thing, which we all have to bear in mind. The occasions in which, you're talking about buildings collapses. There was one that I know she's talked about a little bit, which is a hotel that unfortunately collapsed because somebody just didn't do the calculation, but that was because they were in the wrong mindset. So you have to put yourself in the right mindset, don't you? And that's the change is all about the mindset, as you've been talking about, and getting the right mindset. Am I here? Should I be here in the, I need to question everything because this is a safety critical issue, or hey, this is a time for experimentation to learn and develop and grow.
Yeah. I mean, I'm a child of, the 80s, and the Challenger is a perfect example for me of one where information's sort of there. And sometimes we're afraid to talk about it. Sometimes we're, whatever the reason, right? And I just think that creating that safe zone is, everyone can say we're creating a safe zone of kind of that learning environment, but by really, as leaders, if you're going through a change, just going through questions, getting to everybody's curiosity gets them to become more willing participants. But you don't have to start it with the change per se. You don't have to be going through a massive change to begin building a stronger relationships with change. You just have to sort of start with yourself and something you've been thinking about, something you wanted to learn, something you wanted to try, anything to go into that exploration zone.
Ryan, I'm very aware that I've been sort of asking you questions that have sparked my curiosity, but possibly are the wrong questions for people who have sort of understanding of this. And there must be one question that you really think at the moment I should have by now asked, and it's very foolish of me not to have asked it. So I'm just going to ask you to tell me what that question is. What is the question that I should have asked you? And obviously, once you've posed the question, you're the expert. You're going to have to answer it for me, which is the only way that I can get through doing this. So, what's the question, Ryan, that I should have asked you by this stage?
Yeah, I think I'll stay. I'll stay in a little bit of just kind of giving an opportunity for the listeners to test something. So it would probably be is like, what is one thing that they could do starting right now in order to kind of reframe their thought on relationship with change? And I would say this goes back to that change mindset ebook, which has some strategies in there. But I typically like people to just start with something in their life that it could be small, like pick a small thing that you could just win on, or something that you've known your whole life and you haven't really questioned it. And the reason I say something like that is, as a kid, for a long time we thought, something happened to a child actor in a Life commercial, because we were told that and we believed it and we never validated it. And your whole life you go through these things like, hey, something might be true. So my question for them would be is, pick something in your life that you were taught and you've believed pretty much your whole life, but you've always felt like, there's no way this is valid. There's no way it's exactly like this. And maybe it's not a huge impact, but just start asking the question, where did I learn it? Who taught it to me? Who taught it to them? Is it still valid? What situations were different? What would have to be true today in order for this to be false, or even further in the truth? Just to start to stretch your mind into, it's okay to ask questions. It's okay to start to wonder, like, I don't know. I don't know if this is real. I don't know if this is true. And I would pick on the construction industry and say, like, because we're taught that's exactly how we do it, or how we design, or how we set up a sheet or whatever, and a set of documents. That doesn't mean it's true. It could be something that someone set into motion years ago and just happens to become part of the process, but it's not real. And I think you just have to be willing to start asking questions and see where you get, and just to test it, just stretch yourself a little bit into this new way of thinking, opposed to sitting in this current state of like, well, I think it's too hard to go through the change. I don't want to ask the question, what if somebody thinks I'm not intelligent enough because I didn't know the answer, or, because I've been here for 5 years, I've been doing it. Will I look, silly or embarrassed? Because, you read the book Traction or anything kind of operation systems and think through it. They'll say like, hey, if you're not embarrassed, you haven't gone deep enough. But I would just say, like, you don't have to be embarrassed by it. It actually is this moment of like an aha moment. It's actually this beautiful, like I keep talking about, this beautiful thing that has changed, which is, that's where you're growing. That's where you're learning. It's not where you're actually being downgraded or suppressed. You're in an area of this freedom to sort of explore your kind of a beginner's mindset again.
I love that. And I think that's a really important message as we come to the end of this, because, change doesn't have to be embarrassing. Change doesn't have to be, I can only do it if I'm really hanging out there. Sometimes the incremental, sometimes the small steps to help you get there can be just as effective. And it's about taking yourself from the mindset of, I just want to be comfortable, through to the curious, which actually is probably the biggest shift that you can go through. Ryan, what a lot to think about, and I'm really grateful for the fact that you spent sort of 20-25 minutes with us, just sort of talking us through some of that. Thank you so much. Listen, I'm just going to do a little tiny bit of self-promotion at the end of this. If you would like to get onto the mailing list so that you get an email once a week, which sort of tells you who's coming up, and so that you can join the LinkedIn Live to listen to some of the real experts in this sort of stuff, like Ryan talking to you, go to www.systemize.me/subscribe. It's as simple as systemize.me/subscribe. And there's a simple form. It asks you for your first name and your email address. And that's it. And you'll get an email from me that just basically sort of sets out who's coming up, what they're going to be talking about, and you can come on and ask questions and talk to people like us, the knowledge that people like Ryan have got. Ryan, thank you so much for spending a few minutes with us. Really appreciate you spending that time, and I look forward to spending a bit more time looking at what you're talking about and learning more, because I think change is going to be the one constant that we can all agree is never going away.
Yeah. Thank you, Stuart. Appreciate it.
No problem at all. Thank you.